Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. Bryan Kohberger's parents, Michael and Marion, have been summoned to testify before a grand jury in the unexplained death of 45-year-old single mom Dana Smithers. Smithers disappeared 30 miles from the Kohberger home in Pennsylvania less than 6 months before the Idaho student murders. So is Bryan Kohberger a serial killer? Is he? Leave your answer, leave your opinion in the comments. Before we get to the rest of this episode, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. If you're enjoying this episode, please like, share, leave a comment, and let's get started. Do you remember in the early analysis, there was the sense that we are probably dealing with a serial killer? And I suspect that many people have continued to suspect that. And so isn't this proof of that early suspicion? So in other words, you suspected something, and so now this is proof of that. And so the earlier suspicion means that the proof has proved itself, hasn't it? Because a major reason why the true crime community believe Kohberger probably or possibly had something to do with Dana's death is because, well, we were led to believe that he was a serial killer from day one. You sort of had all the channels, or most of the channels, and certainly a lot of experts and sort of big hitters and pundits telling us to look for human remains in Kohberger's backyard. And guess what? When they did, guess what they found? So what are we talking about here? Well, we're talking about a connection via location. The main way that Kohberger is being connected to Smithers' death is by location. 30 miles isn't very far away, is it? And if you argue that, well, that the where is close by, how about the when? Less than 6 months before the Idaho student murders, something happened to Dana Smithers. And she was practically Kohberger's neighbor, right? Well, I've kind of got a different way of looking at this. You may remember early on when everyone was saying that his profile matches a serial killer, I was saying, no, it doesn't. And when they were saying, expect to find human remains kind of like in his backyard, I was saying, no, you won't. If we compare the Smithers case to the Idaho students, Bryan lived barely 8 miles away, and I've actually driven directly from his apartment to 1122 King Road. I know exactly how long it takes, and I know exactly how far it is. And so the distance in terms of his home in Pennsylvania is it's 4 times further. It's 4 times further away, more than that. And then besides that, he had something in common with the victims. They were all students. So was he, right? What does he have in common with Smithers? Kohberger was also relatively closer in age to the victims, 28 versus 21 or 22, whereas Smithers is over twice the age of the victims. Kohberger apparently left plenty of digital breadcrumbs in terms of his cell phone during stalking sorties. Did he do that in the Smithers case? Now, I think kind of the bottom line, like you should really open with this whole thing when you're dealing with this, is that he has a solid alibi, right? If the media and social media are chattering and salivating about this case, the cops aren't. The cops aren't really looking at it. Why not? Kohberger isn't a person of interest whatsoever in the Smithers case. Why not? Are the cops mistaken? What ought to be front and center in the analysis of this case is the fact that Kohberger has an alibi. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but apparently he does have an alibi. And probably his parents have been called in front of the grand jury as exculpatory witnesses. So what did likely happen to Dana Smithers? You might say, well, Bryan Kohberger murdered her, right? Are there any other possibilities? If you only thought about the fact, well, he's a serial killer, he murdered her just because him and her lived in a similar area. Is there any other possibility? Well, it's not even clear right now. In other words, legally and technically, it's not even clear whether Smithers' death was due to natural causes or an accident, let alone murder. In the final footage provided of Smithers exiting an outside door late at night and walking towards a white vehicle, one breathless commenter asked, "Is that Kohberger's white Elantra waiting in the driveway? Please don't get into that vehicle." No, it's not Kohberger's white Elantra. No, it's not. Not only does the footage show Smithers walking past the vehicle, but she evidently leaves the premises on foot. She doesn't get into any vehicle, and she doesn't even get into her own vehicle. She seems to leave the premises on foot. And I can't really emphasize that enough. This aspect alone, her walking home at night, would easily explain why Smithers' phone and keys were found in her home but not Smithers herself. If she typically walked at night, she may have gotten lost and disoriented and perhaps suffered from some sort of medical issue. We know that Dana had substance abuse issues, so this may also have factored into what happened to her in some way. It's certainly possible that she could have been attacked by an opportunist, since she was found not far from a busy road and off-ramp, but it's not clear whether there were any attempts to bury her body or cover them up, which again makes one wonder if it's murder. If it is murder, what's the motive? Now what I want you to do is take out your notebooks and put together a scorecard. The true crime community, in my experience, likes to hype and sensationalize things to the extent that it becomes fake crime. Remember, YouTubers make money by generating buzz. So they will look at a lot of things and see how can we build on this excitement? How can we make this more exciting? There are certain suspicions and speculations in the public. How can we get that going? And when enough YouTubers say the same thing, it kind of becomes reality for some people. Does that then mean it is reality? Or is it YouTubers making money by generating buzz? So even if a creator suspects or knows the story is bogus, they're incentivized to get your interest, to maintain your interest, to play with your interest. And one way to do that is to pretend that the evidence is stronger than it really is. So now is a good time to take out your notebooks and keep score of which true crime channels are trying to do exactly that. Right? Push the narrative that Kohberger definitely is involved in Dana's death. Right? Who is trying to get you to believe that Kohberger is definitely involved in Dana's death? Secondly, are you being told that Roberta Laundrie definitely wrote the letter to Bryan after Gabby was murdered? In both those cases, it's making Kohberger worse possibly than he already is. It's not enough that he killed 4 students. He must be a serial killer. He must have killed somebody else. Even though he totally botched. If he committed the crime in Moscow, well, whoever committed the crime in Moscow botched it, made a mess, was even seen leaving the scene, left a digital trail, easy to pick up. It's not bad enough that Bryan Laundrie did what he did to Gabby Petito. His mother must also be as diabolical as what he is. And so one of the tests in true crime is, can you see reality or do you want to be told what you want to be told? Do you want to feel that things are worse than they are? Do you want things to be exaggerated and sensationalized, or do you want the truth? In other words, do you want true crime to be true, or do you want true crime to be fake? The true crime community wants to hear the sensationalized versions of these stories, because that would make prosecuting both cases so much simpler and easier. And it also adds some meat and potatoes to these stories at a time after 2 very high-profile cases have sort of been settled, when true crime kind of needs new stories. So these are the popular, more exciting stories. The question is, are they true? The question is, do you believe them? Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.